Good morning and welcome to the Sports Booth. I'm your host, Cade Berkstead, joined by my co-host, Ethan Daubeck. Before we get started, we have some exciting news for you guys. We now have an additional new co-host to help us out, his specialty definitely being MLB and NBA, but overall sports knowledge, with no doubt, will come in handy. So without further ado, we'd like you all to meet Nick Pirro. Tell him about yourself, Nick.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to join the Sports Booth team. Little background information about me. I was born and raised in the San Francisco area. Played baseball all 4 years of high school. I'll be focusing on weekly news that has happened in the MLB, but adding some input on the NFL and the NBA as well. I'm a huge San Francisco Giants fan, and to Ethan and Cade's disliking, I'm also a Warriors and Niners guy.
Boo. Well, we're happy to have you, man. Anyways, back to it. We have a jam-packed episode for you guys today. We're going to break down all of the games from the NFL this past weekend, as well as tell you the top 3 scores from each matchup. We will also be giving you a detailed injury report and what to expect as we head into Week 3 of the regular season. We'll also be giving the first ever regular season NFL power ranking, so see how far the Raiders have risen after 2 convincing wins, and see how far the Seahawks and Steelers dropped after great first weeks followed by losses in their home openers. Today, we will also be unveiling our first ever Booth Sports AFC and NFC offensive and defensive players of the week, but this is not for fantasy, it is just for the sake of the game. After that, we move more into our fantasy episode, giving you our top 3 waivers at each position, giving you our top 3 streaming quarterbacks of the week, all of the official PPR rankings for the top 5 at every position, as well as a little start sit and some fantasy buy or bull. With that being said, let's stop talking about what we're going to talk about and just talk about it. Let's take it to the booth.
We start off with talking about all the matchups this past weekend, as well as the top 3 fantasy scores in every game. Cade starts off with the Thursday night showdown.
Yeah, so Thursday night, the Washington football team knocked off the Giants with a score of 30-29. Daniel Jones went 22 for 32, passing for 249 yards and 1 touchdown, as well as rushing for 95 yards with 1 rushing touchdown, finishing with 29.46 fantasy points. Moving on to Terry McLaurin, who caught 11 passes for 107 yards and a touchdown, finished with 27.7 fantasy points. J.D. McKissick rushed for 10 yards, 1 touchdown, and caught 5 passes for 85 yards, finishing with 20.3 fantasy. This was just a fun game to watch. Players were balling.
Definitely a good sign for Terry McLaurin that he can be effective with Heineke at QB. Ethan?
Alrighty. I've got the New Orleans Saints losing to the Carolina Panthers 7-24. CMC had 24 rushes, 72 yards, and a touchdown. He also caught 5 passes for 65 yards. He had a fantasy total of 24.7. DJ Moore went 8 for 79 and 1, finishing at 22.9. Sam Darnold had a good day, going 26 for 38 with 305, 2 touchdowns and an interceptions, bringing his fantasy total to 18.9. The Saints looked really, really bad, but don't take anything away from the Panthers. They have looked really good on back-to-back weeks, both offensively and defensively. In Chicago this week, Cincinnati lost a close game to Chicago, 17-20. T. Higgins had himself a day, though, going 6 for 60 with a touchdown, bringing his total to 18 points. Tyler Boyd also had a good day, going 7 for 73, bringing his total to 14.3. Jamar Chase, the third Bengals receiver, all 3 of them had good days, going 2 for 54 and a touchdown, finishing at 13.4. Joe Burrow at one point in the game threw 3 straight interceptions on consecutive passes, but no one else did a whole lot in the game. So those interceptions didn't hurt them as bad as it could have if they were playing a more dynamic offense. Fields also did play in the second half for an injured Andy Dalton, but he didn't look terrific. He looked very frantic back there. He didn't have great rushing numbers. I think he was like 10 for 31 or 8 for 31 or something like that. Just not a great game.
Yeah, the Panthers have looked really good on both sides of the ball. And in the Bears game, Fields really didn't look that great, but maybe that's just rookie nerves. It'll be interesting to see if he gets a nod this upcoming week. What do you say, Cade?
Over in Cleveland, the Browns beat Houston with a score of 31-21. Brandon Cooks being the leading fantasy scorer with 9 catches for 78 yards and a score, finishing with 22.8 fantasy points. Nick Chubb was the next highest scorer, rushing 11 times for 95 yards and a touchdown, while catching 1 pass for 3 yards, finishing with 17.8 fantasy. Baker Mayfield went 19 for 21 with 213 yards, with 1 touchdown and 1 interception, ran the ball 8 times for 10 yards and a touchdown, finishing with 17.52 fantasy. As we'll get to in a little bit, Cleveland was all over the place with injuries this week, and it took them a half to get the ball rolling. Over in Indianapolis, the Rams beat the Colts with a score of 27-24. Cooper Kupp dominated that game, catching 9 passes for 163 yards and 2 scores, as well as running the ball 1 time for -5 yards, finishing with 36.8 fantasy points.
Not bad.
Michael Pittman was up next with 8 catches for 123 yards and 20.3 fantasy points, followed by Darrell Henderson, rushing 13 times for 54 yards and a touchdown, as well as catching 3 passes for 29 yards, finishing with 17.2 fantasy. This was a close one in our lock of the week with a spread of -2.5 in favor of the Rams, which gave us a win in our lock of the week.
Yeah, so exactly what we thought would happen in the Browns game did. They just had to figure some things out. With Landry potentially out, it puts a big need for OBJ to return sooner than later. Ethan, what else do you have for us?
In Jacksonville, in Trevor Lawrence's home opener, Denver beat them 23-13. Cortland Sutton had himself a day, going 9 for 159, finishing at 24.9 points. Teddy B went 26 for 34, 328 and 2 touchdowns with 4 rush for 1 yards, finishing at 21.22. Marvin Jones also had himself a good day, going 6 for 55 and 1 touchdown. He definitely looks like the main receiver, especially with Laviska Shenault's and DJ Chark's health and all that going on. And he finished with 17.5 points. Jacksonville does not have a good defense by any means, and they're still trying to figure out that offense. But on the Denver side, Teddy B is definitely looking good, and even without Jerry Jeudy, he was able to get a lot of movement through the air, which was nice to see. Moving on to Miami real quick, Buffalo just destroyed them 35-0. Diggs had a good day, going 4 for 60 and 1, finishing at 16 points. Singletary also had a good day, surprisingly, going 13 for 82 and 1. Also 2 receptions and 9 receiving yards, finishing at 17.1. Allen had a little bit of a better day compared to last week, going 17 for 33, 179, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, finishing at 23.1. Once Tua went out, there was no hope for the Dolphins, and now there are major caution signs in Miami if he is not healthy. But at this point, things are looking hopeful. It's looking like just bruised ribs so far.
Yeah, Miami definitely does not look good without Tua. It was painful to be starting that Miami defense in my fantasy league, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no kidding.
So
especially when you had Buffalo's defense on the bench.
Yeah. But so hopefully he'll be able to return sooner than later. This team looked lost without him. Cade, how did the Pats fare this weekend?
Patriots dominated the Jets with a score of 25-6. James White rushed 5 times for 22 yards and a score and caught 6 passes for 45 yards, finishing with 18.7. Next up, Damian Harris rushed 16 times for 62 yards and a score, caught 1 pass, and finished with 13.4 fantasy.
1 pass for 2 yards.
Next up, surprising, was a kicker in Nick Folk, who went 4 for 4 on field goals and 2 for 2 on extra points, finishing with 15 fantasy. Not a major fantasy day for either squad, aside from James White or Nick Folk. But if a kicker is a highlight, there's definitely a problem. Zach Wilson struggled tremendously, throwing 4 interceptions, but did settle down a little bit once they got in the second half.
What happened down in Philadelphia?
Over in Philly, the Niners knocked off the Eagles 17-11. Deebo Samuel caught 6 passes for 93 yards and rushed the ball 2 times for 8 yards, finishing with 16.1. Jalen Hurts went 12 for 23, throwing for 190 yards, and ran the ball 10 times for 82 yards and 1 rushing touchdown, finishing with 21.8 fantasy. Over for the Niners, Jimmy G went 22 of 30, throwing for 189 yards and 1 touchdown, rushing for 20 yards and 1 rushing touchdown as well, finishing with 19.56.
Hold on, real quick. How long until you think they give Trey Lance the nod?
Well, with their backfield being out, I wouldn't be surprised if they just try a whole new offensive set.
You think so? They just brought in Duke Johnson and Arian Foster, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, who knows what's going on with the San Francisco 49ers backfield right now? That's just a mess. As far as fantasy-wise, I would just stay away from all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, those 2 games, nothing really too surprising in there. What about the upset that went down in Pittsburgh yesterday?
So Las Vegas is continuing to surprise people, beating good opponents back-to-back weeks. Last week on Monday Night Football, they beat Baltimore. This week, they beat Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, 26-17. Derek Carr had himself another big day, going 28 for 37, 382, 2 touchdowns, as well as 4 rush for 9 yards, finishing at 24.18 fantasy points. Henry Ruggs finally got going a little bit, going 5 for 113 and a touchdown. Also 1 rush for 2 yards, finishing at 22.5 points. And Deontay Johnson on the Steelers side had a good day himself as usual, going 9 for 105, finishing at 19.5. Pittsburgh didn't look great, but this is back-to-back weeks for the Raiders with solid offensive performance against very good defenses. So who knows what to expect from this Las Vegas offense going forward. And their defense hasn't looked horrible either. Coming up big when they need to, so that'll be exciting to keep an eye on. Over in Arizona, we had another close game. Minnesota lost narrowly, 33-34. Kyler Murray had himself a great day, going 29 for 36 for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. He also had 5 rush for 31 yards and 1 touchdown, finishing fantasy-wise 33.1 points. Kirk Cousins on the Minnesota side also had a good day, going 22 for 32, 244 and 3 touchdowns. He also had 2 rush for 35 yards, finishing at 25.26 points. Rondale Moore also had a big day as a rookie, going 7 for 114 and a score, finishing at 24.5 points. An offensive shootout that was determined by a missed field goal as time expired, but nothing more Minnesota than that.
Yeah, I truly feel bad for Minnesota. All their kicking woes they've had to experience over the whole entire franchise existence, but talk about a crazy game. Cade, you want to hit us with what the GOAT was up to, as well as the boys? And Ethan, after that, tell us what went wrong in Seattle and how Lamar was able to run his way to a dub.
So over in Tampa, Tom Brady was able to pick apart the Atlanta Falcons defense, winning with the score of 48-25. Brady went 24 for 36, throwing for 276 yards and 5 touchdowns. 5. Ran the ball one time for 6 yards, and he had one fumble. Finished with 29.64 fantasy. Mike Evans caught 5 passes for 75 yards and 2 scores, finishing with 24.5 fantasy.
Jeez, talk about an inconsistent player.
Exactly.
I mean, I would hate to have him on my team. I mean, you could try playing him one day. You could finish with a score of 24.5. The next week, you could literally finish with a goose egg, maybe 2 points. You just don't know what you're going to get with him. If you had him, try to sell him. Try to trade him away right now. After that big week, you might be able to get something. You might be able to get like a good RB3, maybe an RB4, just to solidify your bench as injuries are quickly taking place.
Over for the Falcons, Cordell Patterson had 7 rushes for 11 yards and a touchdown, as well as 5 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown, finishing with 22.9 fantasy. Another offensive boom for the Bucs, and another defensive mess, but this time they had a big enough lead for that not to be a problem. Moving on to Los Angeles, the Cowboys were able to top the Chargers 20-17. Tony Pollard had 13 rushes for 109 yards and a touchdown, as well as 3 receptions for 26 yards, finishing with 23 fantasy. Mike Williams for the Chargers caught 7 passes for 91 yards and a score, finishing with 22.1. And Austin Eckler ran the ball 9 times for 54 yards and got a 2-point conversion. And he caught 9 passes for 61 yards, finishing with 22.5 fantasy. It was a close game that came down to a game-winning field goal. Nothing huge offensively. Zeke owners finally saw Zeke get in the end zone, though Pollard might bring up some concern.
Yeah, do you think Zeke owners should be worried about how many touches Pollard is getting? And the fact that he's getting the touches in important places. I mean, they ran a jet sweep with Pollard on the goal line when they had Zeke in the backfield, and they decided to give it to Pollard. Should Zeke fans be worried? And if they should be worried, should they try to sell high after that massive week that he just had?
As a Zeke owner myself, I'm personally going to hang on to Zeke. I was happy with the 17 that he got me, though. 23 from Pollard is pretty nice, but I would hang on to Zeke unless you can get an absolute steal. Maybe you need a better wide receiver, or if you can, I don't know, maybe take a shot and trade for Najee Harris, even though he's been struggling.
Do you have correct me if I'm mistaken? I know it's one of our leagues that we're in. Do you have Mike Williams on that team?
Not the same team as Zeke.
No, okay, I didn't think so. So, what do you think would be a good offer for who? Give me an example of who you would accept a straight up trade for Zeke. Antonio Brown. I'm just going to list off some names.
I would not take that.
No.
I think I'm pretty well set in the wide receiver spot where I would not need that.
Okay, so I mean, what about we're definitely for Zeke. He's a top tier name. Shit, I was thinking of somebody way different. Okay, Zeke. Let's see. What about TJ Hawkinson and Najee Harris?
For the both of them, yeah, I would probably take that, especially with my current tight end situation.
Yeah. What about AJ Brown and Jalen Waddle?
No, I would personally need another running back to fill that leaving my team.
What about Allen Robinson and Mike Davis?
Are you trying to work out a trade right here?
I am.
Thought those names sound familiar. I still probably wouldn't do that.
All right, one last one. A.J. Brown and Mike Davis.
Still not sold.
Still not sold, huh?
Especially with Cordell Patterson. Seemed to take a lot of rushes and receptions away from Mike Davis.
That's fair. All right, you know what? I'll do a little more looking at both of our teams, and I'll get back to you with the trade.
All right, I look forward to hearing from you.
Sounds good.
You want to give them the bad news now over in Seattle?
I guess so. Yeah. Yesterday, the Seahawks blew a stinker and gave up a 30-16 lead and lost 33-30 in overtime. Derrick Henry went absolute savage mode, going 35 rushes for 182 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, as well as a surprising 6 receptions for 55 yards, finishing at 47.7 fantasy points. I would not be surprised if this is the highest finish for a fantasy running back this year, and the fact that it came against my Seahawks makes it hurt just that much more. But the Seahawks offensive players had themselves quite a day too. Tyler Lockett went 8 for 178 and a touchdown, finishing at 31.8. Russ was cooking again, going 22 for 31, finishing at 343 with 2 touchdowns and 3 rushes for 16 yards, finishing at 23.3 points. I don't know what happened in the second half of this game. The Seahawks defense just couldn't stop Henry, and that offense just could not put more than a play together, mixed with stupid penalties. The Seahawks, this loss is on them. They did not taking anything away from the Titans, but the Titans did not win this game. The Seahawks lost this game. The Seahawks were not outcoached. They were not outsmarted. They were just outplayed. The Titans wanted it more in that second half. But last night we also had another thrilling game. Kansas City narrowly lost to Baltimore 35-36. Lamar finally got that first win against Patty that he had been searching for his entire career, and he had quite the day to go along with it. He finished 18 for 26 with 239 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. He also ran the ball 16 times for 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. Patty also had a nice day, finishing 24 for 31, 343 and 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. He also had a rush for 3 yards. Kelsey had a good day, going 7 for 109 and 1 touchdown, finishing at 22.9. In my opinion, this was the most exciting game so far. The fact that it was on Sunday night. I mean, all of the primetime games have been really good games so far. They've been really fun to watch. Every single one of them. But Lamar finally comes out on top of Mahomes and the Chiefs. So big win for the Ravens after that disappointing loss last week to the Raiders. And yeah, so good for them.
Yeah, so since this is a Monday night, do we want to give a little update on what's happening out in Green Bay real quick? Because let's see what Aaron Jones is doing. He's got 17 carries for 67 yards, 1 touchdown, 6 receptions, 3 touchdowns. That's pretty good game.
Yeah, the Packers are definitely looking a little more like the Packers. Aaron Rodgers is having a much better day. He's 19 for 23 at this moment with 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. His rating is at 148.3, so much more what you expect out of him. On the other side of the ball, Jared Goff is also having a good day, going 19 for 24 with 175 yards and 2 touchdowns with a rating of 124.8 right now. DeAndre Swift hasn't done a whole lot rushing, neither has Jamal Williams. TJ Hawkinson is the leading scorer in Detroit, going 8 for 66 and a touchdown so far. Devontae Adams is having another one of his spectacular games. He's at 7 for 106 right now and no touchdowns, but Robert Tonyan has a touchdown. going 3 for 52 in that TD. But like you said, Aaron Jones is having a massive day, especially on the receiving side. He's 6 for 48 and 3 touchdowns right now. That's just insane. So good for them.
Yeah, I feel bad for that one guy who had that parlay. Just needed the Lions to win, and what was it, $75,000
No,
for?
it was like $750,000. Yeah,
For
he put
just
a
a
$25 parlay bet, and he just did a money line for every game across the board, and he had 15 for 15 right, and it came down, and he had the Lions beating the Packers tonight, and it's just not looking like it's gonna happen. I mean, shoot, who knows? Maybe a miracle happens.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, well, that wraps up some crazy games. Let's take it into a much more concerning and impactful part of the show, the injury report. Guys, what do you have for us?
Tua Tagovailoa left Sunday's game in the first quarter with a rib injury, getting carted into the locker room after taking a hit on a failed fourth down conversion. According to NFL Network's Tom Pelissero, Tua suffered bruised ribs. X-rays were negative, so that is a good sign. But Tua is reportedly in a lot of pain. He will receive an MRI on Monday, September 20th. Jacoby Brissett has replaced him and would be the starter should Tua miss week 3 or beyond. Tyrod Taylor also left Sunday's game against the Cleveland Browns with a hamstring injury and was replaced by rookie quarterback Davis Mills, who will start for the Texans this Thursday night. Andy Dalton left the game with a non-contact injury after scrambling out of bounds in the first half. Dalton went into the locker room shortly after for further evaluation and was replaced by rookie Justin Fields. After the game, Bears head coach Matt Nagy said that they would know more about Dalton's knee injury in the next 24 to 48 hours, but he does not believe that Dalton suffered a serious ACL injury. Nagy also states that if he is healthy, Dalton is the QB of this team. Cade, what you got for us?
Over for the Browns, Baker Mayfield attempted to make a tackle after throwing a pick and suffered an injury to his non-throwing shoulder. Baker would later return to the game after heading to the locker room and finish the game going 19 for 21, 213 yards and a touchdown, as well as that interception. Over for the Vikings, halfway through the fourth quarter, Dalvin Cook received a handoff and was tackled from behind and then escorted by trainers off the field. It appears to be a lower leg injury. Over for the Rams, Darrell Henderson Jr. was helped off the field in the fourth quarter against the Colts with a rib injury. After the game, Coach Sean McVay said there was no further updates on Henderson's status, and it is unknown if he could miss any time. For the 49ers, their backfield is just a mess. Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, and JaMychal Hasty were all injured. Elijah Mitchell suffered an injury to his shoulder in the second half, but lucky enough, he was able to return. Trey Sermon suffered a concussion, and Hasty injured his ankle in the fourth quarter. So far, Hasty has been ruled out, and Sermon and Mitchell's status is to be determined.
Yeah, like I said, they brought in Duke Johnson, and I believe it was, I want to say Alfred Morris. I'm just going to double check that real quick.
Say Foster.
It might have been Arian Foster, yeah. Yeah, Arian Foster.
To finish the injury report, Jarvis Landry sustained the knee injury on the opening drive Sunday and was quickly ruled out. Dante Johnson suffered a lower body injury on the game's final play. Amari Cooper hauled in a short pass but stayed down on the field after taking a hit by two defenders. Texans rookie receiver Nico Collins sustained a shoulder injury during the first quarter of Sunday's Week 2 matchup with the Browns. Danny Amendola suffered a hamstring injury and did not return to the game. James O'Shaughnessy suffered a ankle injury in the first half after just playing 3 offensive snaps. All right. With the game recaps and injury report out of the way, we present to you our first ever Sports Booth NFL Power Rankings.
Bah, bah, bah.
These are something you'll be able to find uploaded on our website every Tuesday morning once the site officially launches. Ethan, who's in the sports booth, first ever top 10 power rankings.
Alrighty, starting it off at number 1, we have the defending Super Bowl champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. At number 2, we've got the Rams. At number 3, the Arizona Cardinals. At number 4, after a convincing win over the Kansas City Chiefs, we've got Baltimore. At number 5, after a disappointing loss to Baltimore, we've got Kansas City. At number 6, Buffalo. 7, we've got Cleveland. 8, we've got San Francisco. 9, Las Vegas. 10, Tennessee after a nice comeback win in Seattle. And at number 11, we've got the Carolina Panthers. Looking good through the first 2 weeks. Cade, what you got after that?
Coming in at number 12, we have your Seattle Seahawks.
Let's go. Let's go, Hawks.
Go Hawks, baby.
They should be higher.
Yep. Followed by the 2-0 Denver Broncos. 14, we have Dallas. 15, the Pittsburgh Steelers. 16, the LA Chargers. 17, the Washington Football Team. 18, Chicago Bears. 19, Philadelphia Eagles. 20, the New Orleans Saints. And 21, the Green Bay Packers. Nick?
To finish the bottom third of the list, at number 22, we have the Miami Dolphins. 23, the New England Patriots. 24, the Cincinnati Bengals. 25, Minnesota. 26, we got the Indianapolis Colts. Carson Wentz, what are you doing? 27, the Houston Texans. 28, we have the Giants. 29, we have the Detroit Lions. 30, we have Jacksonville. 31, we have the New York Jets. And rounding out the bottom of the list, coming in at number 32, the Atlanta Falcons.
Alrighty, thank you, Pirro. Well, there you have it, our first ever sports booth power rankings. Let us know in the comment section below what you guys think about our rankings and what you would change and what you think we have right. Now we move on over to our first ever sports booth, AFC and NFC offensive and defensive player of the week. Pirro, who you got in the AFC?
All right, in the AFC for the offensive player of the week, we have Derrick Henry, the king, the man who's built like a mountain, coming in with 35 rushing attempts for 182 yards, 3 tutties, 6 receptions for 55 yards, with a total of 47.7 fantasy points. And on the defensive side, we have Tyrann Mathieu, with 6 total tackles, 2 interceptions, and one of those was returned for a touchdown.
Alrighty. Bergie, what you got for our NFC offensive and defensive players of the week?
Over in the NFC, on the offensive side of the ball, we have the Eastern Washington legend, Mr. Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, he just absolutely went off.
Catching 9 passes for 136 yards and 2 scores. Running the ball for a -5 yards. Finishing with 36.8 fantasy. On the defensive side of the ball, we had a split decision. Over at Tampa Bay, we had Mike Edwards with 8 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 2 touchdowns. Yep, 2 touchdowns for the safety. We also had Bobby Wagner with a franchise record of 20 total tackles and 1 sack.
Yeah, 20 total tackles in a single game. That's just not something you can ignore. So we definitely had to give him the recognition that he deserved for it. Not taking anything away from Mike Edwards' dominant performance, but he had 12 less tackles than Bobby. And Bobby, he's just all over the place. He is so much fun to watch, and he's the one reliable piece on this bad Seattle defense. Alrighty, moving on to our top 3 streaming quarterbacks of the week. Pirro, you want to give this to us?
Yeah, so we'll start off with number 1. We got Teddy B against the Jets this weekend. Coming in at number 2, we got Dame Dolla's cousin, Danny Dimes, against the Falcons. And coming in at number 3, maybe he's returning to his 2016 MLB MVP worthy season. Derek Carr against Miami.
MVP worthy season, huh?
It might be.
All right. Moving on to our other position waiver shows. Cade, who you got at the running back position this week?
Starting at the top of the list, if he's still available, we got J.D. McKissick.
Yeah, he is an absolute target hog. He just steals shares where you want Antonio Gibson to get them. J.D. McKissick comes in there and steals them. If he's available, go snag him. He is somebody that you can comfortably play in a flex if you need to. He is a very good fantasy player.
Coming in at number 2, also if he's still available, would be James White for the Pats.
Yeah, he showed that he's going to be the main offensive or pass-catching back out of that New England backfield. So he's getting all these third down plays where New England finds themselves a lot, and Mac Jones likes to check down to the running back. He did it all last year when he had Najee Harris, who was a great pass-catching running back. So don't expect that to change. I expect James White to be good for a while.
And rounding off the running backs, we have Mr. Tony Pollard for the Dallas Cowboys.
Alrighty, yeah, he's just coming off a big week. All right, Pirro, what you got for our wide receivers this week?
All right, coming in number 1, we have Rondale Moore.
Yep, coming off a huge week there in Arizona against the Vikings. It's kind of up in the air. They run a lot of 4 receiver sets. They've got a D-Hop, who's obviously going to be the always consistent. They have A.J. Green, Rondale Moore, and Christian Kirk. So it's kind of a risk playing him, but he's definitely not a bad option to definitely pick up and maybe just stash on your bench for a week or two and just see if he becomes that true number 2 there in Arizona.
And coming in at number 2, we have Darius Slayton.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of options deep in this wide receiver waivers right now. Maybe I'm sure some more people will emerge in upcoming weeks. But Darius Slayton is pretty consistent at what he does. He's good for 5 or 6 receptions with 40, 50 yards, maybe throwing a touchdown there. He's a guy that you can play in a flex if you're in a pinch, or maybe just to add a little depth at your wide receiver position.
And then coming in at number 3, Braxton Barrios.
Yeah, he kind of falls under the same thing as Darius Slayton. He's just consistent. He's going to get what he gets. He's not going to get a whole lot more, maybe a touchdown. Same thing if you're in a pinch. I would go Darius Slayton before him, but if he's not available, Braxton Barrios is not a horrible option if need be. Alrighty. Cade, what you got for our tight ends on the waivers this week?
For the tight ends, we have your top 3 tight end for the season, Mike Gesicki, only if Tua isn't the QB.
Yeah, definitely. Gesicki was targeted once last week, and it was called back on a holding call. This week, he wasn't looked at all by Tua before he got injured. Once he was out of the game, he was targeted 7 times, and he caught 6 of those targets. So if Tua isn't the quarterback, expect him to be heavily involved. I don't think he is a bad play at all at the tight end position if Tua is not playing.
Coming in at number 2, we have Austin Hooper, especially if Jarvis Landry doesn't play, and OBJ for that matter.
Yeah, well, definitely. If both of them do not play 100%, honestly, you could probably play Njoku as well. Both of them are going to get a majority of the target volume. People Jones, is that his name? Yeah.
Yep.
He might get a little bit of action, but the tight ends, I think, they're really going to keep it with the ground and pound and then just dump it off to some tight ends, I think. So I think either one of them are a good play, but I would start with Austin Hooper over Njoku.
And now he's a Bay Area guy, Hooper.
Is he? Did you
Yeah,
go
he
to
went.
school near him?
Yeah, he was one of our rival high schools, De La Salle. His brother was a pretty big pitching prospect, I believe.
Oh yeah, dude. Everybody knows about De La Salle. They're one of the consistent top schools in the nation at football.
Yeah.
And rounding off the tight ends at number 3, we have Jack Doyle.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would try to stay away from him. I would try to get Gesicki or Hooper. I would not try to get Doyle. There's not a whole lot of options. You might get lucky streaming him if he gets a touchdown, but that's really going to be the only way that his fantasy value is salvaged. Especially if Eason plays, then he will be even worse. They're probably just going to run Taylor and Hines a bunch. So I would stay away from him if possible. But other than that, Pirro, what you got for defensive and special teams this week?
For defensive and special teams, coming in at number 1, we've got the Arizona Cardinals against Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence isn't looking too great. He's not coming off a hot week.
Yeah, definitely not. He threw 2 interceptions?
Yeah, he got me like 9 points in fantasy.
Yeah, he got me. He got me like, yeah, it was bad. Definitely shouldn't have started him, but it is what it is. Arizona should be able to just feast against this still growing, and I don't think it's going to be a bad offense. I think they need to figure out what their identity is going to be. And once Trevor Lawrence gets comfortable in that identity, I think they will be a good offense. But I don't think they're going to win games if they don't figure out what's going on with that defense.
Yeah, Urban Meyer's probably going through that same learning curve Lawrence is going through.
Yeah, definitely. All right, who's number 2?
Number 2, we got Carolina against Houston, especially if Tyron Taylor's out.
Yeah, Carolina has looked really good defensively the first 2 weeks against New Orleans and week 1 against the Jets. So I would expect them to have a good week against Houston, especially if Tyrod is not playing, and it does not look like he's going to at this point. That game is on Thursday night, and it looks like Mills will be getting the start there. Who's number 3?
Number 3, we got John Gruden, the $100 million man's Las Vegas Raiders, especially if Tua doesn't start, because the Dolphins looked completely lost without Tua out there.
Yeah, even after some thought, even if Tua does play, I think they're going to be very conservative with what they do with him, not putting him in any dangerous situations where he could re-aggravate those ribs. So I still think don't think their offense is going to be very explosive. I would still expect Las Vegas's defense to do pretty well against that offense next weekend. All right, that wraps up our waiver show of the week. Now we're going to go to the top 5 PPR players at every position. Cade, what you got at quarterback?
Number 1, we have Kyler Murray. Number 2, we have Jackson Mahomes' brother, Patty. Number 3, we have the GOAT, Tom Brady. Number 4,
Daniel.
Is that seriously Dean Jones?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I don't even believe it.
Danny Dimes, baby.
And number 5, we have Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, that could change if I'm not positive what Goff's numbers are looking like right now. I know he had a good week week 1 passing the ball. I don't think it'll be good enough to crack him into the top 5, but he could be 4 or 5, which would drop Jones or Hurts. But after that horrible week 1, it's going to take a few weeks of good play for Aaron Rodgers to crack into the top 10. So don't expect him on there for a few weeks of good play. Pirro, what you got at running back?
At running back, at number 1, you can forget LeBron James. There's a new king. Derrick Henry. The man's a beast.
Dude's an absolute truck.
He's the freight train from hell. But then at number 2, CMC, Christian McCaffrey.
Oh, reliable, baby.
Mm-hmm. And then coming down at number 3, we've got the Chubster,
Return value, exactly what you wanted when you drafted him. If you drafted him, you are happy with what he's giving you every week. Same with Henry. Same with McCaffrey
Yeah, if you got a little Chubb, what else do
and
you
Cook.
need? Coming in at number 4, we've got Dalvin Cook. He might cook you up something. Going at number 5, Austin Eckler.
All right, thank you very much. At the wide receivers, we've got number 1, Mr. Cooper Kupp. Number 2, Tyler the Rocket Lockett. Number 3, we've got Debo Samuel. Number 4, we got Adam. He's feeling it, Thielen. And number 5, we've got the Amari Hoopster Cooper. Cade, who you got for our top 5 tight ends?
Top 5 tight ends, starting off in number 1 with Travis Kelce. No surprises there.
Nope.
Number 2, we got the University of Arizona legend, Rob Gronkowski.
Gronk. I'm loving him. I have him in Dynasty, and he is just absolutely killing it.
Number 3, we have Darren Waller. Number
No surprise
4,
there.
TJ Hawkinson. And rounding off the list, Noah Fant.
Okay. All right, guys. For a little, who should you start? Who should you sit? Ethan, Cade, I'm just going to give you a few names that are borderline playable, and you tell me if you would start them this week or not. We have AB. Is that Antonio Brown?
It is. Cade, would you start him or sit him?
That's a tough one for me. He had a great performance week 1, followed by a subpar performance this last week.
No kidding. I took a chance on him, and I regret that decision.
And they do play the Rams this upcoming week, so I'm going to go ahead and sit Antonio Brown.
Okay, but who is going to get guarded by Jalen Ramsey? Is it going to be AB? Or is it going to be Mike Evans or Chris Godwin? Probably not Godwin, because Godwin will be in the slot most likely. I mean, it could easily be Mike Evans that's guarded by him, which I could see causing a huge day for Antonio Brown. So I would actually start him this week.
That's still a sit for me.
For sure.
All right, another player, Corey Davis.
Who do the Jets play this week?
Denver.
Yeah. I'm just not comfortable. He laid a complete goose egg this past weekend. He wasn't even attempted at once. I don't know why. But I would go ahead and I'm gonna sit him. I would just give it a couple more solid fantasy weeks until Zach Wilson just realizes that Corey Davis is the good receiver on this team. Once he starts throwing it at him, good things are gonna happen, and he's not gonna throw 4 interceptions in a game. So I would sit Corey Davis this week.
I agree. I also had Corey Davis as a sit. I think Zach Wilson just needs a little bit more time to settle down and get comfortable. And until Corey Davis can put up consistently good numbers, like at least 10 a week, I'm going to sit him.
Okay.
All right, and unfortunately, this guy's on my fantasy team. I sat him last week. Do I start him this week? I have Saquon.
Well, that's definitely a tough one. Kay, what do you think?
They do play the Atlanta Falcons this week, but I would probably only start him in the flex as a last resort option.
Yeah, if you have to, I would play him in a flex. But if you don't have to, I would just steer clear of him until he's healthy. Kid, I'm gonna just list off a couple names, and you tell me if you would play them over him. Okay.
Alrighty.
Tony Pollard.
Probably not. I'd probably start Pollard.
Okay. James
What
White.
about no?
James White.
I'd probably go with Saquon here.
I got one for you. I got Miles Sanders.
Oof.
I would start Miles
I,
Sanders over him.
I don't know. I'm
I mean,
not too sold on
I
Miles
trust
Sanders.
Miles Sanders more than I do Tony Pollard, J.D. McKissick, or James White. Those were all three options that I give you, so I would easily take Miles Sanders over Saquon, just until Saquon's healthy, you know. And if you don't have Saquon and you've got a few good running backs sitting on your bench, maybe go try and pick up Saquon and just keep him on your bench until you need to play him. Because once he does play, he's going to be Saquon again, and he's going to be good. But I would I would play Miles Sanders. I would play um, Tony Pollard. I would play J.D. McKissick, and I would play James White. I would play all four of them before I would play Saquon this week.
What about James Robinson?
Who does Jacksonville have this weekend?
Broncos, right?
No, the Jets have.
Oh, yeah.
They played the Broncos this weekend.
They play the
They
Cardinals.
play Arizona.
That's right.
I would. I would play Saquon.
What about Brandon Cooks? If Tyron Taylor's out, if I'm putting Cooks as my flex, I'm deciding between him and Saquon.
You know, I honestly have no idea what to expect out of this Mills guy. So that's extremely tough.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, neither do the defenses, so they could be stacking the boxes just to prevent the run because that's what they expect the Texans to do. And Brandon Cooks has shown that he's a good receiver with whoever he plays with, wherever he goes. I would play Brandon Cooks in the flex over Saquon this week.
Okay. Let's knock the next player off our list. Any 49ers running back. It's a mess over there. And
I would not start any of them this weekend. I don't know what to expect from that. They're bringing in other running backs now. Running backs are super banged up. I would just stay away from that mess until it's a little bit more cleared up.
What if they call an audible and Trey Lance is in that starting lineup?
Doesn't change anything as far as their running back position. I wouldn't go near it with a 10-foot pole, especially if Trey Lance isn't as quarterback. They'll probably pass the ball, and if there's rushing to be done, it'll probably happen in the hands of Trey Lance mostly. If not, it'll just go to that committee running back group.
Okay. And then our final player.
Sorry, Cade, would you start or sit any of them?
Yeah, I'd say all of them.
Okay.
Too many question marks.
Yep.
And now the Ohio State QB, which is now the Chicago Bears QB, Justin Fields.
Okay, do you want to start off?
Yeah, so the Bears will be playing the Browns next week, and if Justin Fields does start, I'm not gonna start him. I'm gonna sit him.
Yeah, I wouldn't start him either. I would give him just a couple weeks to really settle into this role. Because there could be a couple things that happen. One, he could just absolutely light it on fire and have an incredible game and be this star-studded rookie that everybody expected him to be. Or more likely, the reality is that he's playing in the NFL and it is a fast-paced league. Look at Trevor Lawrence. Look at Zach Wilson. They're struggling right now. Justin Fields is going to go against an extremely good defense. In all likelihood, they would probably run the ball a majority of the time. And Justin Fields just didn't look that good this past week. I would not start him this upcoming week.
Would you start him over Zach Wilson? Because he's coming off an atrocious week.
I mean, I would never have Zach Wilson. Maybe if it was like Dynasty and I
Mhm.
had Fields on my bench, then maybe. And Zach Wilson was like my QB2 or like a super flex QB.
Yeah.
Maybe, but then even at that point, I would probably try to flex to a different player like a James White or a JD McKissick, somebody that more likely would get me 15 points.
Now, a little buy or bowl for predictions towards week 3 coming up. Derrick Henry receives more than 4 catches this weekend.
So Henry, not a traditional pass catching running back. He's usually just your bulldozing running back, but through the first 2 weeks, he does have quite a few receptions. Indianapolis has a very good middle linebacking core. I think you're going to see the Titans return a little bit more to that play action, but at the same time, I think it's an extremely easy thing for Derrick Henry to do now. Now that there are two good receivers in AJ Brown and Julio Jones there, they can't just stack the box, which allows him to pass block for a quick second and then just check out of it and drop down and just get an easy dump off pass from Tannehill. So I'm going to say he consistently this season hits that 4 reception mark. I think he makes that this week.
I am gonna say bull on that. More than 4? I don't think so. 4 or less? I do think so.
What about 4?
Yeah, 4 or less. I think so, but not more than 4.
Okay, but what about just 4?
Yeah, what about it?
Like, do you think he would? You think he can get 4?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think he'll get 4 or less.
okay. What if I said 3 or less, and then 4 or more? That's more of the question that I was trying to ask.
I'd still say bull.
You think he's more likely to finish with 3 or less?
Yep.
Okay. What's up next, Pirro?
We got Tyler Lockett has another 100-yard game plus a touchdown. Me and Ethan had an outstanding fantasy football trade. He gave me Tyler Lockett, and he's working his magic.
Yeah, I don't want to hear about it. I'm gonna buy it. I think this new offensive scheme works really well in Tyler Lockett's favor. Because defenses, especially with the presence of DK Metcalf, they have to focus in on him, and if they don't, DK Metcalf will easily take those 10, 15-yard gains every single time and let Tyler Lockett just run free. And that one time that the safety slips up, Russell Wilson will see him and he'll get the ball to Tyler Lockett. He does it every time. So I'm gonna buy this, especially against that bad Minnesota secondary.
I'm unfortunately going to call bull on this. I do think Lockett's going to continue to eat up secondaries, but 100 plus yards and a TD once again. I feel like his stint is going to come to an end, but he'll still put up good numbers, maybe like 70 to 90 yards in a score, or maybe just 100 yards without the score.
I could definitely see that. The score is definitely going to be the hard part there, especially since his scoring is coming on these deep passes, and all defenses have to do to stop that is play too high safety and then have a man corner on him. All of a sudden, he's in triple coverage on a deep ball. That is going to be the hard part. But then again, he can be and has shown to be a red zone presence. So who knows? I'm saying bye. You're saying bull. Pirro, what we got next?
Justin Jefferson puts up a finish worth where he was drafted. Top 7 receiver.
I'm going to say Bowl. I think that DJ Reed, the Seattle's best corner, is going to be following him around a majority of the game just because he is the more explosive receiver. With that being said, I think Adam Thielen is set for a big game because he's going to have Trey Flowers on him, and Trey Flowers is absolute garbage at playing football. So expect a huge game from Adam Thielen. I don't see Justin Jefferson putting up top 7 receiver numbers this week, though. So I'm going to say Bull.
I agree. I also have said Bull. Basically, just going off what you said. Thielen's going to have a big week, as well as KJ Osborne is starting to take away some of those receptions. So,
yeah, he's
I'm
definitely off
saying
to
Bull.
a pretty good start this season.
All right, and now to the Roll Tide. Nigel puts up more than 50 yards.
All right, Najee Harris, more than 50 yards. Do you buy or bull that? Rushing yards, I'm assuming, right, Pirro?
Yes, rushing yards.
All right. I am going to say, Kate, I'm curious what you have to say. You go first.
I'm going to buy this, but just barely. I think he's going to have under 100 yards, probably between 50 to 75 yards. I think he's going to be used more as a pass catching back. They play the Bengals this week, but it's crazy that we still haven't seen him rush for 50 yards yet.
Yeah,
but I think he's due for it.
Buffalo has a good defense, right? So they ran the ball 16 times. He wasn't very efficient. He only got 45 yards, had an average of 2.8. Last week, they played Las Vegas, who has supposedly a much weaker defensive front a defense overall than Buffalo. He finished with only 10 carries and 38 yards, so a little more efficient, a little less touches. This week again, I think Cincinnati's defense is a little underrated. I'm gonna call bull that he reaches that. I think he reaches 50 receiving yards, but I think Cincinnati is going to have him locked in, and I just don't think that offensive line is built to have a sustained running game like they are a sustained passing game.
Yeah, the Bengals did hold Dalvin Cook to 61 yards in a TD week 1, and last week they held David Montgomery to 61 yards and no scores.
Exactly. So I mean, they're a good defense, and I would say both of those teams are a lot more run dominant than the Steelers are.
Okay. Now for the final. Buy or bull. If Fields plays, he leads the Bears to a victory against Cleveland.
Kind of going back to what we said again in the start sit when we said that two things could happen. He would either have an incredible week or he would catch the nerves of a rookie, just like Lawrence, just like Zach Wilson has. And I think that would be the more likely expectation, especially against a good Cleveland defense. So I'm going to say bull. I think regardless if he plays or if Dalton plays, I see the Bears losing to the Browns this weekend.
I agree. I also had this as a bowl. The Browns are a good team, and this being his first legitimate start, just don't see him getting the dub.
Me neither.
Is the game in Cleveland?
I believe so.
Okay, yeah. Cleveland's a pretty tough place to play for any quarterback.
Yeah. I'm just double checking that real quick. Yep. In Cleveland.
All right, you guys have any final comments?
You were definitely a fan of the bull for a lot of that, weren't you, kid?
I was not convinced on many of those.
All right, but they were pretty good questions, I think.
They were. think Najee was the only one I said bye.
Yeah, and I said bull.
Alrighty, guys. Well, that wraps up our NFL news and fantasy show. As always, make sure you follow us on Instagram and subscribe to us on YouTube. Get super psyched about our website launching.
And don't forget, when it does launch, every time you purchase our picks of the week, you will be entered to win 4 tickets to the NFL game of your choice in the 2022 season. So make sure y'all check out that on October 1st. So every time that you buy one pick, it's one drawing. So say you buy 14 picks or 14 weeks worth of picks in the season, both NCAA and NFL, you're entered 28 times to win 4 tickets to the game of your choice in the 2022 season.
We appreciate you guys for everything. Leave us a review and comments about what you agree with, disagree with, hate, love. We don't care. We just want to hear from you guys. Hold on. Here's the call from the field. After review, the booth confirms that it is good. Have a jubilant day, everybody. Thank you very much.
Woo!